Okay, for question 7, we're going to start solving, and in this case, when things are factored. So there's a few things we need to remember in terms of getting these questions correct. The first one is that it needs to be set equal to 0. The second one is that it needs to be factored in brackets. So if it's already set equal to 0 and it's already in brackets, we're in good shape. We can solve it. And remember, when you're solving things with brackets, or what we call quadratics in this case, where there's two a's, there's always going to be two solutions. So we need to make sure we find both of them. And one way to do that is that what we can say is if we split this in half, there's a term up the front, 2a, and then there's the term in brackets, 8a minus 8. If either of those are equal to 0, the whole thing will become 0, because 0 times any number will be 0. So what we need to do is split it in half, set 2a equal to 0, and set the thing in brackets equal to 0 as well. And either of those will be a true solution. So using our algebra ideas, 2 times a equals 0. So the opposite of timesing by 2 would be divide by 2. So a is equal to 0 divided by 2. And in fact, 0 by 2 divided by 2 is just 0. Now our other solution, that's a minus 8 equals 0. Well, what's the opposite of minus 8? That's in fact plus 8. So a equals 8. So a equals 0 or a equals 8. Two solutions for us. And again, we didn't have to do any expanding here. You don't want to do that in this case because it's already set equal to 0 and it's already in brackets. So take it as it is and solve it. In this next question, again going through our checklist, it is equal to 0 and it's already in brackets, so we're sorted. And what we want to do here is, again, think about where that equation gets split in half. There's one set of brackets and a second set of brackets, and we'll set each of them equal to 0. So a minus 3 equals 0, or 2a plus 7 is equal to 0. And using our algebra, that's a minus 3. What's the opposite of minus 3? That would be a is equal to plus 3. Now, on the other side of the expression, or the other side of the brackets here, we see 2a plus 7 is equal to 0. And we want to get a by itself. So 2a, what's the opposite of plus 7? That is in fact minus 7. And 2 times a, trying to get a all by itself, the opposite of 2 times a would be divided by 2. So minus 7 divided by 2. A is equal to then 3, or minus 7 divided by 2. Both solutions will be true. And looking at this problem, we notice our first criteria is met. It's been set equal to 0. The second criteria has not been met yet, so we need to get it into brackets. Now if I pay attention, there's nothing that all three of those share in common, and it's a squared term, so I'm going to say that it's going to become a quadratic. I'll need double brackets. So what times is to negative 30 and adds to negative 7? Well, we've got 2 and 15, 5 and 6. Well, what about 3 and 10? Well, 3 and 10 will times to get me 30, and if I make one of those negative, I'll get the negative 30, and one of them positive. And because my middle term is negative, I know the bigger number needs to be negative. Negative 10 and positive 3. Because negative 10 plus 3 will get me negative 7. And now that I've got it into brackets, I can go ahead and solve it. So a plus 3 is equal to 0, or a minus 10 is equal to 0. Again, the opposite of plus 3 would be minus 3. And in this case, the opposite of minus 10 would be plus 10. So my two solutions are a equals minus 3 or a equals 10. And the last one here is a good tricky question. If we think about our criteria, it's not set equal to 0, and it is also not in brackets. So we need to rearrange it so that it's equal to 0. And if we think about our algebra rules, we always talk about opposites. So right now I need to get 0 on this side of the equation, and to do that, if I move the minus 11a to the other side of the equation, there'll be nothing left, and nothing is 0, so that's what I want to do. Minus 11a, the opposite of that would be plus 11a. So I have a squared plus 30 plus 11a is equal to 0. So now we've got it set equal to 0. The next thing we need to do is get it into brackets, but I want you to pay attention to how I wrote this out. You'll notice that it says a squared plus 30 plus 11a. It's a slightly different order than we usually deal with quadratics. You usually always put the number at the end, so we need to think about putting the 30 at the end of those three. So we're going to rewrite this as a squared plus 11a plus 30, keeping the positive 11 and the positive 30 as positives and just changing who comes first, basically. And now, in this case, we can think about what times us to 30 and adds to 11. So going through our list again, 2 and 15, and 5 and 6. And 5 and 6 can work for us. Both of these are positive, so we could have a plus 6 and a plus 5 is equal to 0. And now in our final step, now that we've got it into brackets, set both of them equal to 0 and solve for our two solutions. So in this case, the opposite of a plus 6 would be minus 6, and the opposite of a plus 5 would be minus 5. So these become our two solutions. Again, being sure to make sure it's set equal to 0 and that we've got it put into brackets.